Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast. Your host, James Azar. Make sure you subscribe and follow us everywhere you listen to your podcast. Do so on YouTube and all of your favorite social media platforms because that's where you'll be able to find us. I've got a great episode for you guys today. Awesome. It's one for the books. We're talking to a cop who became a CIO and then decided to become a CISO. And if you're wondering what made him do that, like I said, he was a cop. So we'll get to more of that here in just a minute. Before we get to today's episode, though, we do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. And we'll be right back with the CISO at MEDNAX. And you're going to want to listen to this, folks, because I'm telling you, the story is good. We'll be right back after this message. All right, friends, let's talk about one of our podcast supporters, PlexTrack. When it comes to security assessments, I think we can all agree on one thing: reporting sucks. I know I hate writing reports, which is why I pawn it off to my staff, but not all of you could do that. Red teams hate that there's no platform that gives them what they need to efficiently and consistently deliver their best reports. Blue teams and CISOs and VPs hate copying and pasting findings from all these multiple sources, all these different Excels, into some sort of ticketing system that then generates some sort of analytics reports that's really jimmy-rigged. And so PlexTrack, our sponsors and friends, have finally solved the pain of security assessment reporting for the red and blue teams all in one. For red teams, PlexTrack's custom templating and write-up repository ensures consistency across reports. Reports can be delivered in the browser or exported to a custom Word and PDF document if you still live in that world. For blue team, PlexTrack aggregates security issues into dynamic reports that enables remediation collaboration. Further analytics visually tell the story of the security posture to the C-suite, helping give a complete and final picture for everyone. As a loyal CyberHub Engage listener, you have a special offer of a free 30-day, no contracts, no credit cards, no risks trial of their amazing platform. So go to plextrack.com/cyberhub. Again, that's Plextrack, PLEXTRACS for Charlie, /cyberhub to get your free month of trial on their platform. I will tell you this, I've seen it, I love it. People who have tried this platform have given us rave reviews on it. It really does simplify the red team, blue team communication and helps us all be far more organized in reporting our vulnerabilities. So again, go to plextrack.com/cyberhub for a free 30-day trial. Hey everyone, want to talk to you about our newest sponsor, a company I've known for a few years now. Been a follower of them and appreciate their work, Unbound Technologies. They're finally on board with us here at CyberHub Engage. So let me tell you a little bit about what they do. If you don't have a secure cryptographic foundation, chances are you're struggling to understand the status and security of your cryptographic keys. Unbound's key security and management experts can help with that. Their FIPS validated cryptographic key security and management platform allows you to maintain visibility of all your keys, whether on-prem or in the cloud, without compromising on security. Know exactly where your keys are and how they're being used. Manage them all with a single pane of glass. Automate operations in your organizations. Save time and manpower as well as money. With Unbound, your enterprise can achieve agility, efficiency, gain control, and reduce risk. Today, Unbound is giving all of you an amazing white paper to look at where you can manage your enterprise key management. I've actually read this white paper. It's great. It's helped me a ton with managing my enterprise key management program. You can go to bit.ly/get-unbound. Again, bit.ly/get-unbound. You'll see the description on our website on this episode description and everywhere else. Click that link, go download that white paper, bit.ly/get-unbound. Hey everyone, I really want you to help me in supporting our early sponsor, Get Smarteye. So Get Smarteye is still in beta testing, but what Get Smarteye is, it's an amazing app that lets you control your privacy, whether it be documents, pictures, anything that you want to share with your friends or not. Think of Snapchat, only no screenshots and no one else looking over it. So if you travel a lot, if you're in airports, coffee shops, shared workspaces, and you care about your privacy, Get Smarteye is the right app for you to protect your privacy. And here's the deal. Get Smarteye is still in beta testing. I use the app all the time. In fact, some of you know that I travel a lot, and when I do, I don't like people looking at my screen at airports. I do everything off my phone, and as such, I use Get Smarteye for all my sensitive documents and all my planning. So here's what you need to do to be one of our early technology adapters, an exclusive offer for CyberHub Engage listeners. Text 41411, again, that's 41411, 41411, and type in the message of your text, Smarteye. Then reply to the SMS that you're going to get with the letter Y, like Yankee, and download the Apple Test Flight app. Then go back to your SMS and you'll get a link to download the Smarteye app. Download the Smarteye app and use it. Again, this is an early offer for only CyberHub Engage users. Text 41411. Again, that's 41411 with Smarteye in the message. Don, how's it going, buddy? Welcome to the show.
How are you?
You know, if I was, like I told you right before we got started, I'm amazing, and you're asking me what could be better than amazing. And, you know, I don't know. I don't know what could be better than amazing. I mean, you could be, I guess, someone on Twitter just, you know, going away. Those guys feel really good about themselves on Twitter.
Yeah.
So how are you, Don? And you're the CISO at MEDNAX. And, you know, thank you for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for your service. Love the medals, and you'll be explaining those in just a minute here to our viewers and listeners. So for those who are actually listening to us, make sure you go to YouTube. You'll be able to see our conversation as well, and you'll see what medals I'm referencing that are right over Don's head. And so, Don, before we get started kind of talking cyber, you have a very interesting story of how you got into cybersecurity. Why don't you share that, because that journey is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, I was a police officer in Montgomery County, Maryland. And at one of my foot pursuits, I wound up falling down and hurting my shoulders. So they had to hide me for 3 months in a desk job. And since they didn't want to train me in background investigations, kind of asked me where I had what I had done in college or what other experiences I had. And I said, well, I have some computer programming and some web design and some other things. This is 1999, so the internet is the full swing, but hard drives aren't as big as they are. And they're saying, well, we'll send you over to fraud and computer crimes. We're starting up a unit. There's a need now for us to be able to investigate and prosecute people that misuse technology. So actually, my first case was a murder case in Montgomery County, and I was able to pull out some emails that showed that the wife and the boyfriend were collaborating. And they said, well, if you want to go to training, we'll send you there. And that was how I got into fraud and computer crimes and ultimately computer forensics.
And so from there, how did you end up in your current CISO role? What was that journey like?
Yeah, long journey there. So let's see. Back in my Army days, I always listened to others on what I should be doing next in order to be successful. So I went to college when I was in the military, and then I finished up when I was in the police department, knowing in order to be qualified as an expert in a criminal case, I needed to have some kind of education training. So the obvious was the CompTIA A+, Net+. Then I decided to go back to college to get a master's degree in IT. Unbeknownst to me, I was actually in a CIO course at the University of Maryland University College that was both commercial and government focused. So after completing those classes, I asked the question, CIOs are making a lot of money. How do I get to become a CIO? And I was a pretty awesome recruiter that I was introduced to. He says, well, you need to go in the government and get measured. I said, why the government? He says, well, because you go in the government, you fail all day long and nobody cares. But if you're successful, then you have a resume that you can build on and use to get out. So I said, pretty interesting. So from the completion of the master's program, I jumped out into the federal government, but as a contractor. Now, around this time, CIOs were trying to get a seat at the table, with the board and the C-level suite. And the business was like, fine, if you want to become a CIO and you want to sit at the board, then prove to us that you have some business acumen. So that was the next 3 classes were my MBA. So I'm pretty unique in that I have a CIO certificate, a master's, and then an MBA, and it's all to prove that I have this business acumen. So after I got that, and my first 2 years in the federal government, I decided that working for some of the feds that I was working for wasn't advantageous for my career. Kind of wondered why they were saying some of the things they said, so I chose to become a Fed myself. I started in Immigrations Customs Enforcement and got involved in big data and analytics, and it was a pretty cool time. Then had to get promoted, so had to leave and go to another agency. I wound up being a political appointee on the Recovery, Accountability, and Transparency Board, doing some big data analytics for contracts, grants, and loans. That stopped, and I got my first CIO job when I was with working for the Navajo Nation. They had some government contracts with DoD. From there, jumped out into commercial America, helping somebody out in the pharmaceutical industry. Jumped back into the government as a CIO, and then the opportunity that I'm currently in came about as a result of individuals that had contracts that worked for me saw my appreciation and my desire to make the government agency I was in more secure. And so they're like, I have somebody down in Florida that's looking for a CISO. Would you be willing to take the job? I said, I would definitely appreciate talking to him. I went down, I found out about the business and its mission. And I said, absolutely, I'll come down here. But it was, I'll come down here because I liked the CIO and I liked his mindset and how it was going to be a transformation for the organization. So that was and then plus Fort Lauderdale is not a horrible place to be during the winter and or the summer for that matter.
Unless there's a hurricane.
Yes, and
once every like 5-6 years.
Yeah, almost got the experience one this year, but it turned.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I always hear the funny story of people. I'm thinking of moving to Florida, and so one of the things people keep telling me is to go, well, yeah, it's nice weather, but hurricanes, and I'm like, once every 5 to 6 years, you know what? I'll take beautiful weather for 6 years to file an insurance claim, get a new roof on my house, and probably a few new electronics in an event of a hurricane. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah. The houses down here they're built of concrete, so at least the walls aren't going anywhere. And then the one thing is, I'm from New York and Maryland, so I'm down here. The doors open out, and it's like, why is that? But I didn't think to ask about it. After a while, I got kind of curious and I looked it up, and it was after Andrew that they realized the lock mechanism on the door wasn't strong enough to hold the door closed. So why not reverse it and use the entire jamb to hold the door from coming in? I was like, okay, that makes sense.
American ingenuity. That's why this is the greatest country on the planet. Cannot deny it. This country has American. I wish I still had my America shirt on.
America.
It's your story's really fascinating, because when you and I spoke kind of before we recorded the podcast, I got off the phone and I was like, wow, what a journey for someone, right? To go from, an MP in the military, so you're predominantly law enforcement, to go into, actual law enforcement, to then go into IT within law enforcement, head the federal government route, then realize I'm going to go into the private sector. But there's a lot of stuff that's helped you really reach that level of success. So how has law enforcement and military really kind of helped you become a more complete CISO or a more complete CIO in that aspect? Like, what is it in that experience that is a real edge for people in this position?
So you learn very early on in the military, there is no I, it's all team. So what I've learned from the military is you have to grow the people below you. You have to trust the people below you. You have to put frameworks in place and documentation in place to help the people below you be successful. You know, I'm on the battlefield, I die. Somebody's got to be the next person to step up and take the role and keep going with the mission. Plus, you know, being the military, being the police, you have to deal with a lot of very stressful situations, people yelling at you. So you learn some customer conduct there. And you learn how, when an event happens, like a breach, or, you know,
an incident, anything, right?
Yep, thanks. It doesn't consume you, right? You're like, okay, let's go back to my training. Let's go back to the things we put in place. And then, you know, I'm quickly, and this is military and police, I'm quickly going, you go do this and you go do that. And this is your responsibility. You go do this. And plus, for myself, I'm the kind of leader that, you know, I learned this in the military, I'll rake rocks and pick up cigarette butts. So if I need to go pull cable, if I need to go put something in a rack, if I need to go to the building in the middle of the night in the midst of a hurricane because their servers aren't working and Dallas, you know, our DR can't touch them, I'm the guy that volunteers to go. I'm not asking somebody else to go. And those kinds of things, my team, the people that work for me, they'll go to the ends of the earth for me because they know that I have their back. They know I'm there to support them. And I've learned about training and how important that is to keep people happy and keep them motivated. And I've also learned that in life, you know, you train and you treat people so that they won't leave, but you train them so that they can leave and hope that they make recommendations on the next person that comes through the door.
I've always said that, you know, when you go to big corporations, the constant challenge you're always hearing from a lot of people, and I hear this a lot, you know, when I'm at different events and talking to different people, is, you know, I'm not getting my training. It seems almost like people are afraid to retrain someone to do their job because they're like, well, that person's going to replace me. And when you come from the military, you realize we got to have a replacement. Otherwise, we lose the war. And so right. Just because one person goes down doesn't mean, you know, the next person shouldn't be able to fill that role. And, you know, that really does play into that. You know, what's very interesting about kind of your path as well is before you became a CISO, you were a CIO. Which most CISOs want to become CIOs. I don't know a lot of CIOs that want to become CISOs. Now, we're going to talk about the fact that you're an adrenaline junkie. So that's not the answer I'm looking for, right?
Yeah.
What advantages was it for you to be a CIO, then become a CISO, and kind of going down that route? Like what advantages did that give you as a CISO in dealing with your CIO and dealing with the organization of sorts?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, the CIO has been the spokesperson for IT, you know, for many, many, many years. And it's only recently that the CISOs, like the CIOs of the past, have started asking for that seat at the table and asking to be the spokesman. And so for me, going from the CIO role where I'm briefing the board and I'm responsible for strategy and I'm responsible for innovation and I'm responsible for advancement and training and everything else of the organization. You know, today, you can't look at cybersecurity as this little small piece that hangs off of IT. It's become its own separate entity because it not only has to protect the data that the organization has, but it has to comply with regulations like Sarbanes-Oxley and HIPAA and Graham-Lieberman and GDPR and all these other kinds of things. So it's really taking on a really significant role in an organization. And the leaders of the company want somebody in that position that can speak in public, can speak in front of the board, can keep the organization safe. And so going from a CIO to a CISO was an easy transfer. First of all, the CIO loved the fact that, you know, he was getting an ex-CIO and a CISO, and I wasn't going to be walking in every day going, I need more money, I need more people, I need more money, I need more people. You know, I walked in and I said, and this is something I learned as a CIO, take stock of what I have. Do we have the right tools? Do I have the right people? And you know, in my 18 months, I had a very large transition of people for one reason or another. We standardize on our tool sets. And then, to your point about training, I spent money and I brought the vendor in that gave us all the tools. And I said, I need you to train my entire team on all of these tools so they know what they're doing. So I came across a really good saying the other day. It was like, 2017 was a building year, 29 was practice, 2020 is now execution. It's game time. And the team all like that. So, yeah.
It's fascinating because oftentimes, there's that challenge between being a CISO and a CIO, kind of going back and forth. And I started saying earlier that you're kind of an adrenaline junkie. You're telling me you're an adrenaline junkie. So, what gets your adrenaline pumping in cyber, man? Because, I know I get like 4 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah, I get less. That's even with a couple of drinks. So what gets my is finding new ways to find out where the bad guy is or bad girl is inside of my organization. The company I'm with now, we're 20,000 plus people, and those are 20,000 entry points into the organization at any one time. And we don't have the most up-to-date systems, and you won't find anybody out there that does. Nobody's doing patching 100% of the time really well. So what can I put in place that allows me to look at the environment as if a hacker was looking at it? And that's kind of my mindset. And then what are the tools that are up and coming and new that can help me, right? The new concept is, what do they call it? Like, I'll think of it in a minute here, but kind of diversion tactics, where they're setting up honeypots. Used to be the old way of doing things, but they're a different way they're doing things now. So it's learning about all the new technologies, but also it's about watching the people that work for me go do things like they'll go pull down all the passwords in the organization. They'll run across them, rainbow tables across them, known hashes, and they'll come back and say, yeah, we got like 10 people in the organization. We need to change their passwords. So to me, they get excited about that, and then we're protecting the organization, putting things in place and training social with email, compromises. Those are all things that excite me, and I think every day, what else can we do? What else can I learn? What else can I help the people I work for that work with me learn and make the place safer or more protected?
So a lot of times, that we say CISOs are kind of the sacrificial goat, as one would say, the scapegoat, that sacrificial lamb when bad stuff happens from an IT perspective within an organization. And how do you account for CISOs? What do CISOs really need to do to kind of transform that mindset within the organizations of you don't let your CISO go and bad stuff happens?
A lot of it is the conversation with the board and with the C-suite on what the risks are in the organization. The other part of that is, and I learned this from a guy named Jay Ferrero. He was a CIO in Atlanta. He changed the organization from being IT or information technology to being business technology, because it's really the business that should be driving what technology does. They should be making the decisions. IT or the IT department just implements it. So what I do when I come across things that are vulnerabilities in the organization, or they are risks in the organization, then I'll go find the owner of that particular data set or that particular application, and I'll explain to them what they're inheriting, what the risks are, and ask them if they'll accept the risk, and then document it. So it's a partnership. And by involving the business, there's the business and myself sitting there. It's not just pointing the finger at cybersecurity anymore. It's pointing the finger at the product or the business unit. So that's been helpful.
So folks who are just tuning in, we're with Don Cox, C.I.S.O. at MEDNAX, and so the very interesting aspect of kind of a CISO, when you're talking about being business driven rather than IT driven, is how do you translate that down the pipeline to, let's say, marketing and sales? And, because technically those are the, units in the business that typically have the most scrutiny, but they typically have the best budget. So how do you translate that down? What are some of the things that you do to get sales and marketing excited about security so that it really does become a revenue driver?
Yeah. So the way I'm currently doing it is, because we're publicly traded, we have to comply with Sarbanes-Oxley. But we're getting more and more of our business partners that are asking us if we have a SOC 2, Type 1, Type 2 certification. Do we have a high trust certification? And so what I've gone to business development and I've gone to the business and said is, look, for us to be competitive, for us to be the provider of choice to people, if we walk into the meeting saying we're high trust, we're SOC 2 compliant, we are these things, then the person next to us that might offer the same service, if they don't have that certification, it's less of a risk to do business with us than it is to do with that other person, because the third party's verified that we're compliant, we're safe. So that translates into dollars. How many deals did they not get because they weren't SOC 2 or weren't high trust? How many did they get because we came to the table with that? So it's changing cybersecurity from being a cost center to being a revenue generator. And how do you explain to the business that that's possible? That's one of the ways that I've done it.
So, we talked about the fact that healthcare is predominantly compliance driven, right? HIPAA, high trust. When you're publicly traded, you've got a whole other set of regulations and rules that apply to your business. How does compliance impact your security program? Does it hinder it? Does it change the way people look at it? Does it change the C-suite and the way the board looks at security because of compliance, or is it the other way around?
It depends who you talk to. Obviously, the people that have to give you the data that allows you to comply with it. Like for Sarbanes-Oxley, every month we have to go to the IT department and say, give me the files that show what you did with your financial databases, and then we have to go through it, right? So those people are probably like, oh, Sarbanes-Oxley, it's just a pain. But then, the others, they see it as helping us to stay secure. Really, I mean, you could look at those things and say they're a hindrance, but you can also look at them and say and I got this from day one, the chief operating officer of the company. He goes, if you walk in here and you tell me you need something, I'm going to ask you why. And if the next word out of your mouth isn't Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, or some other regulation, I'm going to tell you don't need it. It was like, and he was joking when he said that, but it was like, it's the truth, right? If you can show that this regulation requires us to do this, like requires us to disable accounts after 30 days if nobody's logged in. Well, some organizations, people haven't logged in for a year, and it's only when they do training that they realize that their account isn't done. So, if you have to make that change, you can just point to a regulation or point to a regulation and say, we have to comply with this. Minimum password length. There's a whole host of things that you can tie back to some regulation that help you secure your environment.
When we talk about, HIPAA and high trust, and, we talk a lot to healthcare, one of the key aspects there is obviously the advancement of IoT devices, the interconnectivity, the fact of how the data flows and so forth. What do you see coming in the healthcare industry that could help kind of quiet down a lot of these fears? Or is this an overhyped, meaning is it just a click grab, or is it a real threat to healthcare?
No, it's a real threat to patients. I recently watched Blacklist. I avoided it forever, but then somebody told me to go watch it. And there was one episode where a gentleman invented a device that went in his child's heart, and a hacker found out about him, found out the device was in his daughter, called him and said, watch your daughter. And then he dialed down the device that was in her chest, which slowed her heart. And he said, you're going to pay me X number of dollars unless And if you don't, then I'll kill her. And so went through a whole scenario there. So that's just, pacemaker. Think of all the things that we're trying to develop in that help patients. Putting devices inside of the people just to determine what's going on inside of their bodies. Made famous by the Navy SEALs and their training when they can check out internal temperatures and what's going on there. You have pain pumps. You have defibrillators. Cars. Somebody driving down a street. All these things about cars and how vulnerable they are. Planes and how vulnerable they are. So I think it's really serious. I think it's really scary. And most of the CISOs and or CIOs talk about how do we get our arms around this and how do we prevent people from getting hurt.
So one of those things. So I was at earlier today. I was at our AFCIA chapter meeting here in Atlanta, and one of the and we were talking about essentially DNS over HTTP and over DOH and a bunch of other stuff that really does have an impact. But where does security in healthcare begin? Should maybe the organizations demand this from the vendors, or should this be coming down as another form of regulation? Is that what's going to get the vendors to do this? Where do you see this kind of coming to a place where, because obviously we realize we all have to wrap our heads around it. I think the question that everyone asks is who's going to have to pay for it and who's responsible for it. And I think that's it's a game of chicken, right? The vendors are like, well, you're going to want our stuff, but we're not going to spend money on security because that hurts our margins, or you won't buy as much. And the hospitals are like, well, we really want this because we want to save lives. That's our business model, right? We want to cure people, save lives. But then, investing in security also hurts our business. So I mean, what needs to give?
So you ever heard the saying, we need education and we need to learn about history, otherwise we're doomed to repeat it?
Absolutely.
That never really dawned on me until a couple of years ago. I was at a CISO event and somebody sitting on a panel said, we need to look at cybersecurity today like Congress looked at the car many years ago. And he referred to seatbelts. The auto manufacturers screamed about how much it was going to cost them in order to put new equipment in, and how they would increase the price of the car to the consumer. And meanwhile, you had the government saying, look, putting a seatbelt in a car is going to help prevent people from dying. And so after all the lobbyists got done what they were doing, right, the auto manufacturers legislation came out and said you will put seatbelts in the front of the cars. And, nobody noticed an increase in the price of a car. Nobody noticed a decrease in the sale of a car. So the lesson there is, right, put the onus back on the person that's creating the product. Now flip that forward, and to your point, the people that are making software, they're like, look, for me to be competitive, I have to get this code out faster than the next person, and I don't have time to test the code. Well, today, that's not an excuse. We have a lot of tools and technology that can automate the testing, and before you check the code in, check for vulnerabilities, check for backdoors and all kinds of things. And I think if we put the onus back on the developers of the software or the makers of the technology and say, you have to protect this before it goes out on the street, I don't see that it'll be a real big expense. I think it will improve our security. The other side of that too, and there's been some people that I've worked with over the years, and I've seen this personally, is the United States really has to get back to and figure out a way to develop its own hardware here in the United States. We can't stay a very strong nation if we're dependent on others to give us our technology, because as we're seeing in the news, we have no idea what's coming with the software and the hardware that could hurt us.
Well, we have no idea what's coming with people. I mean, this new virus that's coming out of China, that's big, it's the new SARS, is devastating. Right. In a town of 8 million people, that's the size of some European countries. And so, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, those are real threats. By the way, to answer your question on manufacturing, I was at Dobbins Air Force Base here in Georgia at our AFCIA chapter meeting, and one of the questions that we were discussing was around, well, you've got Air Force and you've got military, government, and industry in a room. And so obviously one of the questions is going around, well, how do we secure our defense manufacturing? And, they're all like, well, we're never going to really bring manufacturing back. And I said, well, not necessarily. We don't have to bring all of the manufacturing back here, but critical components we can. And there's a cost-effective way to do it. Every state in the United States has opportunity zones and hub zones that need investment, that have unskilled workers. That's why they're opportunity zones. So those are, when you're going to manufacture something, you're not looking for skilled workers. You're looking for someone who's going to stand at an assembly line, who can do a robotic job for 8 hours a day.
Right.
And you're going to get tax credits for it and so forth. And part of that, Congress could also say, hey, when you're buying from a hub zone, we're also going to tax credit the company that buys from those zones, so that the purchase ends up being a little bit cheaper. But that, again, that the effect of rotating the economy and the funds that keep going in, more people work, more income tax. So, it ends up being almost a wash if you did a math right, although I never trust Washington to do any math that is right to begin with. But nonetheless, we're not going to get into politics we don't get into politics on the CISO Saturday special. So, but that's one of those where I go, if industry would just come together and go, we're going to go identify 8 different opportunity zones in America. We're going to go to Indiana, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, parts of Louisiana, parts of Missouri, parts of Kansas, parts of Wyoming, parts of Idaho. You've got places in middle America that are starving for this, small communities where you can build these micro assembly places that can serve a region. So you're, from a healthcare perspective, you don't have to have one big facility in China that serves everyone. You can build these in all kinds of different regions, and they're micro, so you can increase and decrease based on, needs and so forth, and availability. And there's just and with technology today, with big data, there's really no excuse for us to be relying on anyone to really do stuff for us, because we can do everything here.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
Sorry for that rant, but when you said that, I'm like, I've been screaming this for like 2.5 years. I'm just like, opportunity zones, folks, they exist in America. And there are employees who are willing to work for $10, $12 an hour in small communities, because in a rural community in America, $12 an hour is a lot of money. In Seattle, it's not a lot of money. In Miami, it's not a lot of money. In New York, it's not a lot of money. But in in Macon, Georgia, $12 an hour, right, Micah, is a lot of money. Yeah.
Well, the example of India creating the very large call centers. Why can't we do that in the Midwest?
Well, we do that. We do that. Actually, from a military perspective, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, they all get tax credits for opening call centers near military bases for military spouses.
Perfect.
And so that's already the case. I know that when I worked at Verizon Wireless, 3 of our nation, because we never outsourced, Verizon, as far as I know, has never outsourced their call centers. But all the call centers were outside of major military installments. And most of the women or men that were working there were either veterans or spouses of people who were full-time military.
Yeah, some of the other things along those lines, job sharing. I was a big advocate of job sharing, whether it's a woman and a man or whatever, and give them benefits. Even though they're working 20, 30 hours a week, give them benefits. You'll never have a better employee than the people, because they're appreciative.
So I lived in Israel for a period of 5 years. And what's very fascinating for me, Israel has a single taxpayer healthcare system. Now, for a country of 8-9 million people, where the birth rate is effective, it's not gone up, it's not gone down, it's actually gone up. That works. But the very fascinating part of their entire system is there's a position that's called a mom's position. And so it's for mothers. They don't want the mothers to sit at home, but a mother can also work a 45-hour-a-week work week. So they had a position that legally, when the woman applies, she has to write on her CV, I'm looking for the mom role. The mom role requires you as an employer to comply with her working from 9 to 3, Sunday through Thursday. Can't force her to work overtime, can't do anything like that. But you know what? Those are the best employees, I remember I was the vice president in one company, and my strongest, most productive shift was from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And at 3 p.m. I'd have more people working because that my 9 to 3 people would leave, but then we'd have our 1 o'clock shift come in and work in through the night. Well, they weren't as productive. The 9 to 3, those women, they got full benefits, they got a salary appropriate of the hours that they were investing in the business, but they never wanted to leave because for them this was a guaranteed good job. They come in at 9, they leave at 3, they go pick up their kids from school, go home, make dinner, homework, do everything they do. I wish we did that here. I wish more organizations adopted that here. I think our unemployment rate would be even lower if more organizations did that.
So bring that back around into cybersecurity. One of the conversations that I've heard last couple of years is an auxiliary cybersecurity force, right? And we're starting to our states. So what if, and patent and trade, U.S. government agency is almost 90% remote workers. They're measured by the time that they log in, the number of patents they review, all those kinds of things. What if we created a workforce of people that they can just log in whenever they wanted to and do bug bounties or threat hunt or do whatever for your organization, and then you pay them whatever, like you were saying, $10, $12 an hour. They work from home. They can work at night. They can work during the day when the kid's sleeping. I mean, what a great use of resources that have been avoided or not utilized in the past. So I think that would be a great idea for the government to get involved in something like that, and or just some Fortune 1000 company.
Absolutely. Bringing that back a little bit, because you brought up a lot of that, but one of the greatest threats for CISOs, for CIOs, for organizations in general is that insider threat. It's that person who knowingly or unknowingly, right? And I want to say unknowingly are a threat to the organization. And I'm not talking about the people who click on every email they get. They go, oh, it's the Nigerian prince. Me and him are friends. I love him, right? Not the clickbait stuff. But how do you start to manage an insider threat program, especially in healthcare, where healthcare is essentially a supply chain business. I mean, data goes from, one person's data is never in one place. It could be in 7, 8 places along the route for just one treatment or one doctor visit. How do you start to deal with that?
So first, it starts off with policy, right? You have to put policy in place that says these are the standards. These are the guidelines for how this business will operate. And you have to start ratcheting down some of the things that you allow employees to do. So a few things. One, I'm not the CISO or CIO that's ever says no. I'll just tell you what percentage of yes I can give you, right? And people are like, their 100% might really be 60%. So it's how do you get them there? But so policy gets put in place. Once policy's in place, you have to on the policy. So we've locked down using some technology, websites that people shouldn't be going to, websites that are brand new, right? There's the concept of the just stood up because they're going to use that for the threat hunting. And so people will have to come to us and say, hey, I can't get to this site. And we'll say, what's the business reason for it? And they're like, well, I want to shop while I'm working. Well, sorry, it's not a business reason, so we're not going to open up. And people go, at first they complain, but then they go, okay, I get why you're doing it. You're trying to secure the organization. I'm learning and reading about all this. It's the constant monthly trainings, train people how to protect themselves at home, because if you teach them how to protect themselves at work, they could really care less because they don't own it. It's not theirs. And in the end, it's putting technology in place that actually watches, right? So for healthcare, it's watching the EHR systems for people that are out there, what they call VIP snooping or looking at records and they shouldn't have, and then have penalties in place for dealing with them, right? Your first time offense is a counseling statement by your manager. Your second time offense could be firing. It could be a monetary reprimand, which probably in commercial America doesn't work. But you'll see, if you're in healthcare, you'll see these massive layoffs of like 50 people because they've all violated HIPAA and they have to get rid of them. So it's kind of tying it back to that. And then the awareness, right? So telling people, look, insider threat is real. If you hear about people that are having financial problems, or you know somebody's unhappy at work, then let somebody know, let your manager know. And finally, there are technologies today, file integrity monitoring. We can actually, and I'm drawing a blank on the actual word for it, but we can track everything that a person does, and we can baseline and normalize them. So any time when they go outside that box, it'll alert us, and they'll say, hey, this person's looking at files, or they're downloading things, or they tried to get access to someplace they've never been before. And the unique thing about technology, you can actually incorporate what they're doing on their keyboard into cameras, where people walk places that they've never walked before, or they just look suspicious. It's really technologies, if you can coordinate all of it, can help us secure our environments a lot better and deal with the insider threats.
I was looking to hear you say that, because coming from a law enforcement background, I figured you'd be like, hey, this is, like sniffing out a mole. You can set up little traps here and there and see what people do, because it's very interesting, because the insider threat program, especially around healthcare and financial services, is unbelievable. I mean, knowingly and unknowingly, there's just that threat is one of the greatest vectors, and it's often overlooked, not paid as much attention to, because of, there's no way this person would do this. He walks into the office every day. He's in our awareness trainings. He's, whatever. So kind of going and transitioning into decision making, how do we go from a reactive approach to a proactive approach?
For me, that transition has been trying to empower a full-time pen testing team, not a red team, but a blue team or a purple team. It's using technologies, artificial intelligence, which I'm not supposed to use that word because we haven't gotten there yet, but machine learning, automation. We have to start trusting that we understand the workflow in our processes, and at any point that it diverts from that workflow, that automation can shut it down and then we can react. It becomes a problem when you're an e-commerce business and something causes your website or pages to go down, and it just happens to be the most popular product. But then again, if somebody's cross-site scripting that particular web page, or they're doing a SQL injection, and you want that stopped. You don't want to keep that going, because now you have a compromise of your data. So anomaly detection is and then being able to use anomaly detection to help automate. Do I limit the person's access? Do I send them a note that says, hey, we know you're doing this, stop it? Do I send something to the SOC that says, please investigate this a little further? I think that's how we get better in the future. Just one word, it's automation.
I completely agree with that. And yeah, I mean, absolutely. We got to automate. And like you said, don't just employ a red team, have a blue or purple team in there as well. So kind of moving into that final kind of, wrapping up our interview here, we're getting towards the end, Don. And so how should CISOs account for social media? So we know that hackers are now weaponizing LinkedIn extensively. Mm-hmm. I mean, every day I see 4 or 5 posts of people on LinkedIn going like, hey, here's, I've got a really funny one that I was planning on posting on Sunday morning. Of someone who reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm like, yep, you're not that person. There's no way you're that person. But we're starting to see them use LinkedIn as a vector, because really it's a business networking, it's an opportunity place. And guess what? There's no monitoring going on. Like, no CISO could secure LinkedIn, and LinkedIn's owned by Microsoft. So I'm going to stop there and just say, well, it's going to be a while before anyone patches LinkedIn. So, how do we start to account for social media in the era of it being weaponized to launch cyber attacks against our network and organizations?
So I'll give you a couple of different examples. One example is going to be the most extreme. So I worked in the federal government, and I had a very, 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 very high clearance. I worked in some of the, they call them SCIFs and those kinds of secret. And so one way is you just have to block social media. It's not something that should be used at work. There's no business purpose. And if it happens to be needed by like media or marketing or somebody else, that's a small group of people. And then you have to put mechanisms in place to protect them and train them. So that would be an extreme. As you start coming down from that, then it is, what's the business purpose of allowing people to get to Facebook, Twitter, to get to LinkedIn? Are they really using it to generate revenue? And that's the word, you talk about what are things that the CISO has done. And I did this when I was a CIO, almost got me thrown out the door by all my peers, but tying everything that security does back to a business revenue generating activity. And being able to show that by doing this, you're actually creating a risk in the organization and you're harming them. It also comes down to training people, right? These are the things you need to look for. These are, LinkedIn does have some people out there that will try to compromise your accounts, get your passwords, get you to do things that you wouldn't. So it's kind of all that. And then, there are some technologies out there that can help you watch what people do on social media. I go back to my days in law enforcement and government where I was literally downloading everything people said on Twitter, Facebook, just named a social media. And we were looking for indicators based upon keywords of who might be threatening the president, who might be trying to build a bomb, and who might be. So if you want to employ some kind of a social media capability for your organization, there was a program the Army put together years ago called Able Danger. And they were actually able to consume a lot of the internet and then be able to tell that 9/11 was going to happen. They couldn't tell exactly where, but they could. The guys that owned that turned it into a revenue generating capability. They would go around to corporations and say, these are all the things your people are saying about your business out on the out in the real world, and it's hurting your business in this way or that way, or it could be. And they'd go back to the employees and say, look, and that's when policy started getting put in place. You can't use social media to do this, this, and this, or say these things. And so it's a combination of all of that, I think.
To me, the fascinating aspect of all of this is the line of LinkedIn being a business social media, social networking platform, and how it's being used for business, and then the privacy of an employee of being able to use LinkedIn. So you and I are both CISOs. I'm sure you get the amount of recruiters who contact you every day, like, "Hey, want to hear about a new CISO position somewhere?" And that's typically, my green light of looking at that person going like, all right, who are you? What's your website? Who do we know in common? And, you kind of start to research the person before you even answer it. Because I've seen cases of corporate espionage where the hackers are trying to understand a company's defensive. They want to hear, someone's achievement. So they're going to roll out the red carpet and send a recruiter to offer you a job that sounds 3 times better than the ones you've got now. Your dream job, just to be able to get reconnaissance on the organization you're working for today in order to be able to launch an attack or be able to infiltrate the organization. Because good CISOs, we do good basic blocking and tackling. We know how to block and tackle. We know how to stop, the little stuff, but it's that big stuff that we worry about.
Yeah. Well, I need more recruiters to call me because I'm not getting a whole lot.
So hey, recruiters, call Don now. Do it.
Yeah.
MEDNAX, I'm sorry.
You bring up good points, like, whaling, that's going after senior people. But then the threat actors have figured out that I don't need to go after the whale. I need to use social media to figure out who their executive assistant is, because what do people do? I'm the executive assistant to the CIO of this company. And then on top of that, they're advertising who their third-party vendors are. So there was a period when I was doing investigations where we were finding out that the third parties were being compromised and getting all of the intellectual property that the company had from the law firm or from the patent, patent attorneys. And so, yeah, it's like multi-vector nowadays. You really got to know where your data is and how it's being protected.
I've always said that if I will never hire a vendor that has logos of companies on their website.
Yeah.
No, won't do it. Because the moment you've got a vulnerability, Mr. Vendor, all the hacker has to do is go on your website and see all the logos just strolling there, and then just go, okay, Delta, Chick. Home Depot. Chick. No, thank you. You're not allowed to use my logo. I don't want to do business with you because, you know, when you're sitting with me face to face, that's a different conversation than one on your website.
You know, I'm surprised. Usually the one question I get when I'm talking to individuals, podcasting, is, how secure are you? And it's like, why did you ask that question? It's like, I'm as secure as I can be. I know I have some gaps, but I'm constantly trying to find those gaps, because it's the guys and the gals that come out and say, oh, we're really secure. It's like, no, you're not. You have no clue what you're doing. And that's really the vendors, or the hackers are like, oh, okay, let's see. Like the guy that said, nobody can hack my social security number. Within 3 hours, his social security number was made public.
Yeah, there's people who kind of are like, hey, come. That's one of the questions I never ask is how secure is your organization? You'll never hear that on the CyberHub Engage podcast, not ever, ever. Because that's just that's like going to a police officer and going, so how understaffed are you? Well, we don't go past 71st Avenue. It's too dangerous out there. So everyone knows who are you going to rob? Everyone north of 71st Avenue. You're not exactly the right thing to do here.
Appreciate that.
You don't want to let people know what other people are, what people like yourself are doing, because at the end of the day, CISO to me is one of the most vital positions in an organization. It's also, the first person to get rid of when something bad happens. But that's why I do these podcasts and I talk about your philosophy, because at the end of the day, people understand the value of a CISO by hearing this content, not by someone asking you, how secure are you? And would you use this type of technology in your organization? And you're like, what does that have to do with anything? No, I'm not answering those questions. I plead the fifth. The fifth. I was on a podcast where someone asked me that. They go, would you consider employing this kind of technology in any of the companies you're a CISO at? And I said, not answering that. They're like,
right. Yeah, well, to your point, I get the phone calls. Hey, we want to help you. Tell us what your problem areas are. Or can we come in and meet you, then discuss your problem areas? No, I don't talk about, I wouldn't be a very good CISO if I talked about what my issues are over the phone with somebody that just reaches out and calls me.
Yeah, literally before I sat down, before we started this, our office phone here rings, and they bring me the call, and they're like, hey, it's someone wants this, and it's a vendor, and they're like, hey, we sent you this report, and I wanted to get your opinion on the report. And I'm like, no, you want my opinion on a report? Like, you think I have time to read reports, lady?
I sent an email back to somebody and I said, please send me your report in a text file. They're like, why?
I only take reports that come in a web page where I don't have to put in any information.
Exactly. There you go. Yep.
That's the way to do it. So wrapping up, fire round. All right. One buzzword you take to the back, put a bullet to its head, and bury it in a deep grave. One buzzword you do that to.
One buzzword, artificial intelligence.
And what's the one, I guess, what's the one header of an email that you'll never click on?
Virus error. That's something that just happened to me recently. But no, so the ones where it says you've won money, right? The Nigerian scams you made fun of, or the Canadian scams you made reference to. You've won money, or there's money waiting for you. So I would never click on one of those.
Right. I love those, by the way. I love those Nigerian scam stories.
Although I will tell you, back when I was a police officer and I was Secret Service, Electronic Crimes Task Force, the people that said buy your car. And even though I was charging the car like $2,500, I'll give you $3,000 in a cashier's check. You can keep the extra $500. I loved reaching back out to those people and saying, yeah, I'm all in. I want to help you. I had the power of law enforcement, and a bunch of them turned into us arresting those people for different things. Or at least the funny part, this is a good part, right? They always sent somebody else to pick up the car. Well, the money always, since it's going overseas, always goes back to like a New York bank or some other bank. So if I get their bank routing numbers, then I can just seize their bank account. So we used to seize like millions of dollars at a time. And if people would call up and say, it's my money, well, come get it. And they're not coming to get it.
So our address, we're at 1 Secret Service Avenue. We own the entire building.
Yeah.
Come unarmed. Or armed, either way. It's your funeral.
Yeah.
Or jail cell. I mean, save the taxpayer the money. Come armed, please. Yeah. What technology do you see changing cybersecurity in the future?
What technology? So it has to do with the SIM tool and how it integrates. So the new buzzword is SOAR, right? And of course, I don't know what it means, but
it depends on who you ask.
Yeah, so, SOAR. So I think that's a concept and that's technology that is going to revolutionize security. Because I think we're going to be able to adapt quicker to the threats that occur. We're going to see them as anomalous. We're going to see them a high risk percentage. So I think.
Well, SOAR brings everything together, right? Because it's your orchestration tool. So,
exactly.
It essentially merges all your security into one massive unit that lets you really be able to get a complete view where you don't have to go look at, vendor A and what you're seeing there and vendor B and what you're seeing there and then try to connect the dots. With SOAR, you're supposed to be able to see everything, allegedly. And I say that allegedly because I haven't seen a very good SOAR platform yet.
Yeah, I'll pick another one while I'm at it. Zero trust. It took a long time for people to understand what that is. But if you don't take it literally, there are some technologies out there that will actually allow you to whitelist applications to be running on your servers and prevent the spread of viruses and prevent other executables from running. So some form of zero trust along with SOAR is definitely going to be advantageous to people in the future.
So you heard that here. Don, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really do appreciate your time and your willingness to be just so frank and open, sharing about your experience, your past, going from an MP and a cop to a CIO, and then somehow deciding to, shoot up some heroin in your arms and go to become a CISO. My Lord. I salute you, sir. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything that you do for the cybersecurity community and continue to do out in Fort Lauderdale. And I'm excited to be able to, bring you back on the show, later on and be able to discuss, how things progress and as you grow. And maybe when you become a famous CIO, we can have this discussion around now that you were a CIO, went to a CISO, went back to being a CIO, what'd you learn?
Yeah, or maybe COO, who knows? But yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Come back anytime.
Thanks, right. Don. So folks, Don Cox, CISO at MEDNAX, amazing podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our sponsors who support our podcast and help us to continue to deliver pure, real conversations that take the word and artificial intelligence and go click, click. It's buried in my backyard. And so with that being said, we've added to the graveyard artificial intelligence. That's it for this Saturday's episode. Hope you're enjoying your Saturday, Sunday. Hope you got some good stuff out of this. You can interact with Don, obviously, on LinkedIn. And if you're trying to sell him something, make sure you use the word artificial intelligence because that beats his spam filter. And until then, this is James Azar signing off, wishing you all a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom. And we'll be back with so much more on Monday with our daily cyber briefing live on YouTube at 10 o'clock Eastern time every single day but Friday.